Hello and welcome to the new video. Here on my channel, you'll find the best tips for your online security. Today, we're talking about the topic of cybersecurity. And today, I've brought a very special topic with me, special in the sense that all of YouTube is talking about it, namely OpenClaw. And yes, maybe some of you are already annoyed and thinking, oh no, not another OpenClaw video. This is actually about AI agents, that is artificial intelligence agents, from a cybersecurity perspective. That's what I felt was kind of missing. With all the videos and all this hype about OpenClaw, everyone now has a digital employee. You just need to buy a Mac Mini and then install this OpenClaw bot, this AI assistant. And it can answer emails, it can make phone calls for you, it can create PDFs for you, it can build websites for you, very good websites, by the way. I tried it out and it's really impressive. As for these AI agents, in this case, I tested Cloud Code, not OpenCloud, which is very important to distinguish, but in principle, it also works with Cloud Code or with another AI tool. It was called Manus, that's right. These tools can simply perform a specific task for you, carry out something that previously had to be done by a human or for which you needed employees. I'll just name a few examples now: answering emails, writing documents, creating websites, yes, researching websites, or in general, the topic of research is also known from Comet and Perplexity. And what was actually so new about it was that this programmer, Peter Steinberger, I think he's from Austria, had programmed this Open Globe or whatever, which was accessible to everyone. And it was the first real, true employee that had full access to the laptop and could do everything on the laptop. And today in this video, I want to talk with you about OpenClaw and of course also about other AI assistants on this topic. To talk about cybersecurity from a cybersecurity perspective, because that's something that gets a bit overlooked. Everyone was saying, wow, OpenClaw can now organize your folders, create documents, turn them into PDFs, answer your emails for you. And what I found very impressive, even research leads for you, similar to what N8N does, and contact these leads on its own. That's the whole workflow process that takes place, which of course you also had to set up with N8N. And OpenClaw and many AI assistants can now do all of that completely. Autonomously, if you grant them access to your laptop, they can really do everything, literally with admin rights and whatever you command them to do. Your wish is their command. So to speak, it will then also be carried out. There was a very good video from a German magazine, a computer trade magazine, which said it was incredible what this AI bot was able to do. It started with the question, what is the capital of France? Paris? That was very simple. ChatGPT can do that, and other AI tools can answer that just as well. And the deep research for publicity is no longer that overwhelming either. But it went further with users saying they could make normal phone calls with this OpenClaw. I found that quite impressive. And of course, it also responded cheekily and casually saying, I simply have access to the laptop. I can take a look at all the documents and then give you feedback on them. That was more or less the wording. And of course, in private, it's not a problem or less of a problem, though it's still a problem. If you give this AI agent access to the entire laptop or the entire PC, in this case, the machine, and then grant it admin rights, that's what it basically means. It's similar to an antivirus program, but of course, the background is different when you grant those admin rights. And access rights, write access rights, access to all programs, access to all folders, yes, access to all documents. That's where it already starts, with privacy, with the issue of data protection, and of course also with security vulnerabilities, for example, Microsoft Word, or access to the internet browser, which is especially important. Of course, that's necessary. How else is the AI supposed to act on your behalf? If it doesn't have access, it obviously needs this access as well. It doesn't matter whether it's Cloud Code or OpenCloud or any other one. AI tool, it makes no difference. They need this access so that they are allowed to perform an action. And the difference here is that OpenCloud, or in this case, Cloud, asks for permission. May I do this? May I perform this action? And yes, with OpenCloud, that wasn't entirely clear. Clear what? What access rights even exist at all? What exactly it is allowed to do? It just executed it. Of course, you also assign these admin rights at the beginning. You define these admin rights, that's clear. And you also say, yes, you may take over my entire computer. You have all the rights that I have as well. And then we basically work together as a team. Why is this critical from a cybersecurity perspective? Because these security vulnerabilities can be exploited by hackers or other cyber criminals. And then you can end up catching something pretty quickly. It could be a virus, it could be mainstream malware, or it could be anything else. For private users, I would say it's perhaps more critical, the issue of data protection and privacy from my perspective, because you usually have a lot of documents on there. That could be on the laptop, but it could just as well be in the cloud. Nevertheless, this access right usually also applies to the cloud, which means the AI can see everything there as well. And I do wonder about that. I don't know if it's such a good thing for it to know all of that. And honestly, we already tell ChatGPT way too much sometimes, at least that's how it is for me, things you really shouldn't share. This mainly concerns home users working from home, or as mentioned, private users. But for companies, the situation is much more critical, in my opinion. I've already written an article about this, pointing out that access is granted on multiple computers, that it's so great to be able to collaborate with several people using this open AI assistant, to use it as a team and have multiple people working with it, and then actually granting admin rights as well. And it then has access to everything that happens on the laptop and everything that happens in the company as well. Basically on the internet, in the entire network. And yes, it then knows everything about the entire company. It knows everything about the employees and has complete access to everything, as I've mentioned several times already. Exactly. And that's the crucial point. The crucial thing is simply that security vulnerabilities can play a major role here. It's like, to put it simply, you're basically inviting someone into your house, because if someone exploits this and takes advantage of the security vulnerability, they're inside the system. And it's also being criticized in the context of antivirus protection, that if you bypass it, you then have permissions for everything. But as I said, the advantage with antivirus protection is that Kaspersky or another software tool is supposed to provide protection. Here, of course, the background is that this bot executes everything, every command. And if someone now gives it a specific command, how is it supposed to know that it's not the authorized person, but rather a hacker who has broken in and now taken over the system? It then executes this command there. And of course, security vulnerabilities always exist. That is always a risk when you actually install it on your laptop. Everyone needs to be aware of that. There were also some very good videos about this from major cybersecurity channels, which covered the topic in more detail, both in Germany and in America. And they said they would not recommend it. They advise against it. They advise private individuals, and especially companies, businesses, and freelancers, not to use this OpenClaw board, because it was simply portrayed as, how should I explain this, a bit demonic, maybe even devilish, not in a spiritual sense, but actually from a cybersecurity perspective. It's just that this character also illustrates it quite well. A kind of humor, an evil humor, that then can do anything. That might even be able to more or less nest itself on your laptop. You also know this from a worm, because security vulnerabilities can be exploited. That was one thing that more and more people on YouTube were talking about it. There was a real hype around OpenClaw and all the other AI tools. Lately, it's really been getting on my nerves. And here too, I wrote an article about how I view it very critically, that these AI tools are being used more frequently in businesses. Of course, they are advantageous, no question about it. You can quickly write articles with them. You can conduct research quickly. You get answers to questions relatively fast, and you can educate yourself further. These are all advantages that I have already listed. But now comes the crucial disadvantage. And it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with this open cloud board or with the issue of exploiting security vulnerabilities, but rather with the topic of overestimating oneself, or more precisely, overestimating AI in this case. It was about a YouTube channel claiming, probably even more or less directly, since it was specifically about this, that cloud code is so good that you no longer need cybersecurity consultants, and of course no more marketing experts, and naturally no more designers. And who knows what else? I have no idea. That was just one example, one of many. The main focus was on cybersecurity consultants, but in the past it actually has also been about marketing experts. And I am fundamentally very critical of that, because it's simply not true. You always need certain experts you can consult for advice, right? Human expertise, which can assess things better than chat or any other AI tool. They are important, and I sometimes seek advice myself. I also often do the research and then ask, what should I know about this? How can I further educate myself as a cybersecurity expert? But what I found very, very concerning was that it was considered good there. Then security vulnerabilities on a laptop were identified and discovered. And these security vulnerabilities were then patched by themselves. They were able to patch them on their own, able to close the security gaps themselves. Privately, I see this again from a different perspective. It's okay if you just test the whole thing out and see what's possible. You might also use it for educational purposes, but I don't think a company would go and say, let's take JT or cloud and see what security vulnerabilities we have, and then we'll patch them automatically. For one thing, I don't think companies themselves would invest that time. Many companies, I know this, and on the other hand, I don't think many companies would say, yeah, let's just trust ChatGPT or another AI tool and let it advise our company. And based on that advice, we then assume that it's correct. It's not like getting a paper from a newspaper. It's simply asking an AI tool for advice. And you blindly rely on this recommendation. That can turn out well, but it can also backfire very quickly. And my clear opinion is it's always necessary. You always need cybersecurity experts. You always need IT staff. You always need an IT and computer science department, so to speak. Always this human expertise that can better assess and analyze the risks. And that actually applies to every area, because there were several videos on YouTube also on the topic of marketing consulting. Yes, it's important that ChatGPT is now so good that it can take on the role of a marketing consultant and can also tell me what I can improve, what I can enhance in my marketing strategy, and what really makes sense. In the past, I really used to pay 200 euros per consultation to an online marketer for that. And of course, it's also important to note that there is a certain potential here for positions or tasks to become obsolete. Primarily, this actually affects solopreneurs and less so marketing agencies. But it's still the case that a marketing agency or a marketing expert simply has the overall perspective, the foresight, and can say, yes, I can see exactly the weak point here, that you're focusing too much on blogging. You're focusing too much on that topic, YouTube marketing. That's just one example. And you're neglecting client acquisition through LinkedIn, which would be much more effective. And no AI can assess that. And it's the same with the topic of cybersecurity. An AI can uncover security vulnerabilities in a company, but it can't specifically say where the weak point is. Was it a phishing email? Was it an employee who clicked on a phishing email? Was there no antivirus protection at all? Or is there some kind of vulnerability here because outdated software is being used? Maybe even an outdated version of Windows? All of that AI can't assess. Of course, you can give it the information and then maybe figure out, okay, we could get new IT equipment, invest in new hardware, invest in new software, or we could close a security gap. We could train our employees in phishing awareness. All of these things can certainly be addressed with AI. I've already made a video about this, how a company can consult ChatGPT as a cybersecurity expert. This expert doesn't always have the expertise, maybe just advice. Exactly. That's a world of difference when I use chat or PSI or whatever they're all called. If I ask a targeted question about cybersecurity in my company, then of course I get a detailed answer, especially if I use role assignment. But I don't go and say, you are my advisor for everything from now on for our company. We will always ask you for advice, and now we will completely rely on what you say. Everything you say is absolutely valid, and we will implement all of this in our company, in our business, just as you say. And that's the danger in many areas. I'm repeating myself here of saying, okay, now we're going to do everything with AI. And I really know that many companies, especially solopreneurs, again, are very much working with AI, working a lot with publicity and all these research tools. And that really is an absolute advantage. It truly is a game changer. The Edge browser as well, I've already made videos about that. Google is now also increasingly focusing on AI, artificial intelligence in the browser, and Opera has been doing so anyway. And every company will inevitably have to deal with this. But it's important to me to also be able to educate people about the cybersecurity risks. And to really keep an eye on that, not to demonize AI, absolutely not. That's the other side, which many SEO marketing agencies do, where they say AI will destroy everything. It will destroy all professions. It will destroy all consulting jobs. And that's just the same. And in my view, they trigger things just like the other side does. And you really have to weigh that up for yourself. I can't really assess where it actually saves me time in my daily business and how significant or good these errors are. How much can you really rely on it? And here it's crucial to actually consult an expert again and say, the AI described it like this and that. What do you think about that? Is that correct? Or how do you assess the whole thing? Yes, that was just my take on it. It was just something I wanted to address today by making a video and giving some insight into what you should know about these AI tools, these AI agents that are being used more and more. And of course, they're also becoming standard. That's going to happen, no question about it. And as I just mentioned, it's coming to every browser, and soon it will also be coming to Windows. And I will continue to report on how all of this develops in the future on my YouTube channel and on my blog. It should get quite interesting, especially when Windows introduces the recall feature. Again, the topic of data protection comes up, very interesting. And of course, also the AI features of Copilot. Also a security risk. And above all, when combined with the Edge browser, they may pose an even greater security risk. Yes, I know, of course, Windows Defender is running in the background, but you shouldn't rely on it alone when planning. And by the way, you shouldn't rely on any other one either. Just a side note, I've mentioned that in the past as well. There are so many different construction sites, so many components that play a part in this. Building blocks, exactly, that's the word. Building blocks that play a role here. The employees, the company structure, the IT you use, the devices you use, the software that's installed, all these things need to be taken into account. Or can you just say, okay, we'll just rely on this AI tool, on ProPilot or on Windows Defender? That's simply the wrong approach. So it was really important to me to convey in this video that OpenClaw does indeed have many downsides, but it can still be a very productive tool. And as I said, this applies to every AI tool. And that you definitely need to be aware of these cybersecurity risks. You must. Thank you very much for your attention, and see you in the next video.